My name is James Joseph SEEDSMAN. I'm known as Jim, and I've always been known as Jim SEEDSMAN. At the present time, I'm 83 years of age. I live with my wife in Camden at Unit 5, 14 to 20 Barsden Street, Camden. It's an over 55-year complex, and it's a comfortable place to live. From my recollection is I've been there 17 years. I'm married to Gloria Louise McMahon. She was also a resident of Rosebery where I lived, and they've been married for 61 years. For the grace of God, I have 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. My 2 sons, Paul and David, were first born. Then there was Louise, Karen, Denise and Andrew. All of them are alive and well and going good. My father's name was David Hamilton SEEDSMAN. My father's birthday was the 7th of September, the day before my birthday, 1904. I'm sorry, my mother was born in 1904. It was 1901. My father was the best person I ever met. He was born in Victoria, and his mum wasn't married at the time. She worked as a housekeeper for a man named SEEDSMAN, and eventually they married and had a lot more children. At the age of 14, Dad left home in Victoria and travelled by train to Sydney and got a job in the GPO, the General Post Office, as a telegram boy. He used to tell me that a lot of the work he did was on the north side of the harbour, where it was very hilly and what have you. And he worked his way through there, and whilst he was working in that field, he was very involved in athletics, and he had some success as a runner. From my recollection, Dad had asthma, horrible asthma, and my recollection is that every night he would get out of bed, light a powder, horrible powder that was sitting on the top of a tin lid, put a blanket over his head, and breathe this powder in to try and relieve the asthma he had in his body. Every night I recall him doing that, because he used to wake me up with his coughing, and he would still get out of bed every day and go to work. Dad and Mum married my mother Ellen, and I've never known him to love anybody more than he did. He progressed through the GPO and got promotions, and he worked as a prosecutor for the GPO. He got very involved in the Labor Party at an early age, and to the day he died, he was a true Labor man. As he progressed through, he became a private secretary to Senator John Armstrong, who was the leader of the Labor Party in the Senate. And he and my sister Nell used to travel to Canberra every week to work in the House of Parliament. The home I was reared in was a very Christian family. It was a Catholic family. My mother was a very devout Catholic, but Dad was just the same, and he was a caring man. Our home there was never any smut. It was always straight up and down, but very happy. We never had much, but we had a wonderful life, and as Dad progressed through the GPO, got a little bit more money in the house, and he was able to educate each of his 6 children at a Catholic private school, and each of us did well in our later life. My father died. He was in hospital with a serious infection in his bowel, and they had given him enormous amounts of penicillin. And the day he was told he could go home, he got up to have a shower. He died in the shower for a burst aneurysm, an aneurysm in his aorta, and just fell down and died. My mother was born in Salford, England, and she eventually migrated to Australia with her mum and dad, my grandparents, and they moved to Richmond. I remember Mum telling me she used to have to walk a long way with her father to catch the train to go to school. My grandfather, Joe, worked on the railways where wages weren't very high. My grandmother, to my knowledge, never worked. The funny thing about my grandmother, much as I loved her and what have you, she was a terribly private person. There's no way you'd ever call her Ellen. Her name was Nan, and that was all there was about it. And I don't think I've ever even discussed her name before, you know. Ellen O'Connell, that was her name. I look around today and see the problems associated with domestic violence and other things. And I recall my mother, never once did I ever see her do the wrong thing. She was always there with us, for us, with us. She cared for us in every way. She up every morning early, got our lunches ready, our clothes were fine. She was really a saint. She was a saint in this regard. She loved the Catholic Church. She used to be very much involved in the church, and she ran the home exactly as you probably would run a convent, I suppose. But we never missed out on one solitary thing. Our family has always been a family that's involved in sport, and rugby league and racing. And Mum used to take particular interest in the sports, and she used to love a racehorse trainer by the name of Colin Hayes. He was the prince of the day, and she used to back his horses religiously, you know, $1 each way or 50 cents each way, and never said a word to anybody. Nobody knew. Whoever, when she'd passed away and the estate was done, she had a fair whack of money in a bank account, and we were all wishing to goodness we'd got there first. I remember my mother's death clearly. She got to a stage in life where she suffered from dementia very badly. In fact, she was known to get out of bed at 2 o'clock and walk across the road to several houses and wake them up to go to Mass. And it got to a stage where she lived over the road from my sister Nell, and she went into a Catholic retirement home, Cronulla, with the Mercy nuns. She was extremely happy there. There was a chapel, she had a faith and what have you. Anyhow, she got crook, really crook. She went to hospital, and she had several operations. And I recall clearly the night she died, I was there with her with my family, and she vomited an enormous amount of blood. It was just the most horrific thing you could ever imagine. When that stopped, the doctor came in and he said to us, "Look, I can't do anything more for your mother." And we had to make the decision to just leave it go as it was, and Mum passed away and went to heaven. Mum was a receptionist in the GPO at Redfern, and Dad, as I said, was moving around the GPO at that time, and they got together and met, and eventually they married. They married in 1925. They had their first son, David, was born, and he died 2 days after his birth. And then Patricia, Molly, Nell, Jim, John, Terry and Ann. And they're all great people. However, some of them are in heaven with Mum and Dad. I was born in a house, number 2 Ripon Way, Rosebery. As was the custom in those days, women had their babies at home. And after a period of time living in that house, we moved across to 5 Ripon Way, which was directly across the road. And we lived with my grandmother and grandfather and 2 of my an uncle and an aunt. The house was pretty full. Good to go once again, was very happy. And my grandmother was a marvellous cook, so we never went without, and we had a great life there. I can remember my brother Terry being born. The night he was born, again it was in the house, and Dad had us all out of the house, up against the fence, neighbour's fence next door, keep out of the way. And I remember a very serious fire on that night, and my beautiful brother Terry was born. Yes, well, after Terry was born, some years later, Anne was born, but this was different to being at home. The decision was made for Mum to have the baby at Randwick, and she went away and had Anne, and Anne was born on my sister Pat's 21st birthday. I remember the day very clearly. Yeah, well, Rosebery was I don't know, it was just another suburb, had 5 or 6 shops, Catholic school. There was a couple of public schools, probably a couple of kilometres away. Everybody knew everybody. in Rosebery. It was one of those places where everybody knew everybody, and if something was wrong, they would care for them. The only way you could get to the city from Rosebery was to walk several kilometres to a tram stop and catch the tram into the city. We never had a motor car because Dad couldn't drive at that stage, and didn't have any problems with it. If we wanted to go away, we'd walk to the tram and we'd go away and have picnics and do what had to be done. So my father used to take me to the races. I remember I went to see him at champion races. He took me to see a champion racehorse when I was 8. His name was Burnborough. And for the life of me, I can't tell you how we got there. I imagine it must have gone to the railway, Central Railway Station, then caught a tram to the Randwick races, but we certainly didn't have a motor car. But I remember that day vividly. After I left school, I was a butcher. And Dad used to go to Canberra every week when the sittings were on with my sister as his secretary. And he had a horse in the backyard, and the horse also used the stable in the end of the garage. And it was my responsibility to look after the horse in his absence. He'd probably weigh 3 days a week. I'd have to feed it in the morning. Of an afternoon when I come home from my work, I'd again feed it and I'd walk it, exercise. And in those days there was very little traffic, and I'd been taught to ride by my uncle Keith at Ralston. I used to exercise the horse on the bitumen road and sometimes take it onto the massive sand hills we had near us. And yeah, I enjoyed that very much. Could ride anything, David, ride a buck jump or anything. Yes, I could ride a horse. My uncle taught me how to ride a horse. My uncle was Keith McPherson. He married my auntie Eileen, and after he served in the army in the Second World War, and after the war, I think with a little help from Dad, he got a soldiers' settlers block at a place called Ralston, near Mudgee, New South Wales. And as a young man, I used to get on the train, the Mudgee Mail, at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and travel up to Ralston. And when I got there, my uncle Keith was waiting for me in a horse and cart, take me home. And then during the day when he went to work, he was working on a rural property, and I used to go with him and yeah, learned to ride a horse. I would like to mention the fact that when we lived at 5 Ripon Way with my grandparents and Vince and Eileen, the Second World War was in full swing, and on one night people were digging air raid shelters, and we had one in the backyard and had them at school. I'm sure if there had been a bomb near them, they would have killed us all, collapsed on top of us. But one night, a midget submarine followed a Manly ferry into the Sydney harbour. There was a big net across to stop it, but there was a gap there for the ferry to go through, and this midget submarine followed it through and sank a boat on the harbour, which was a ferry boat, but where naval officers were sleeping. There were shots being fired, and Dad had us all out of bed in the hallway, sitting under a table. My uncle Vince was a mighty man, a mighty bloke. He was laying in bed, and Dad said, "Quick, get up, Vince, we could get bombed." And I said, "No, Dave, I'm staying where I am. I'm going to die in bed if I'm going to die. Wouldn't get out of it." At the age of 5, I went to St Joseph's Rose School, Catholic School, Rosebery, which was no more than 300 or 400 metres from where we lived. I was taught by the Mercy nuns, and I stayed there and completed my 4th class. After that, I went to school at Morris Brothers, Randwick, which was near the Randwick racecourse, and I had to catch 2 trams to get to work, to get to school. Most mornings, Dad would come on the tram with me. He would get out at Cleveland Street with me, well, picked up the 2nd tram, wait till I got on the tram, then he'd walk to work, which is quite a number of kilometres. That's the type of man he was. I did well at Barston College in primary school. My marks were good. And when I went to secondary school, I got involved with Latin and French, and I had a lunatic brother. He was a violent man and used to throw our school cases out the window, and it hit you anywhere with a cane. And I just couldn't manage it. So Dad made the inquiry, and I then went to school at St Patrick's College, Church Hill, which is very close to Circular Quay. It was a school where you still did your mathematics and English and what have you, but there was woodwork and metalwork and technical drawing, and I really enjoyed that. up until I was 15 years of age. As soon as I'm here, I come home one Friday, looking forward to the weekend. The dad said, "Come out, I've got something to show you." There was a push bike that had been painted by somebody leaning up against the side of the house. He said, "That's yours." He said, "I've got you an apprenticeship as a butcher, and you start at Redfern on Monday." I've never been able to work out why that happened. Maybe because I'm old and losing it, but I never went back to the school and picked up my hat or the other things I had in my desk. Never went back to the school. Lost complete contact with all my school friends there. However, I went to the butcher shop and started my butchering career. I met an old man there who was a butcher, but he was very kind to me and very helpful. Got me started, and by a miracle, after about 9 months, a vacancy from the apprentice butcher come where I lived, 200 to 300 metres from home. I completed my 7-year apprenticeship there with a man named Jim Trewick. He's like a father to me. In the end, he financed me into my first motor car worth £400, and I got to love the butchering game. It used to take £1 a week out of my wages, and I finished up paying the car off. A little soft top green coloured Austin A40. We used to be able to travel where we wanted. I'll tell you a story. Getting back to my family, my father said to me, "I don't want you doing things too early so you'll have nothing to enjoy later in life." As true as I'm here, my sisters would go to Kingsford, which was probably a couple of 3 or 4 kilometres, to a Chinese restaurant. He'd make me take them there, wouldn't let me go in because he was too soon for that. And then when they were finished, they'd ring home, so I have to go and pick them up and bring them home. I never tasted fried rice till I was about 19, I don't think. Whilst I was at Marston College, my father, being a person who loved athletics, trained the athletic team for the college with great success, I must admit. And amongst the good runners there, the really good sprinters, there was a fellow named Bernie O'Neill. He was a handsome, blonde-headed young man. And in time, because of my dad's association and our association, he met my sister Pat, and he married her. However, at the age of about 18, I started to play tennis with him every weekend, and I got the real bug, and I practiced every opportunity I got. And we went from playing C grade to A grade together. He was a bit aggressive. Sometimes with the opposition, he'd deliberately upset them and do what had to be done, but he's a bloke I learnt to love and respect, and he actually taught me how to be a punter, biggest mistake of my life. But we used to go to the races together, and he was quite good at doing race form, and we had some success and lots of losses too, I guess. He married my sister, and now she's deceased, and he's on his own, like most people are at an older age. Pat, my next sister was Molly, Marie Therese. She was always a quiet, decent girl. Eventually, in time, she wanted to go into the convent as a nun, and sure she did. She went in as a nun, and she spent her life caring for disadvantaged children and families and what have you. She had a good life. Brooklyn is on the Hawkesbury River, right on the Hawkesbury River, and it's a big old home. Maybe it must be built for flats or whatever, I don't know, but it's on the Hawkesbury River, and the Mercy nuns own it. And whilst during her time as a nun, Molly went there in charge of the place with several other nuns and a lot of helpers to rear children who were broken away from their families. Sometimes she had 3 or 4, sometimes she had 2. A lot of them had been through terrible times, and she nurtured them and loved them, and she turned them into very nice human beings. Nell came along, and My three sisters loved each other. I can remember that clearly. They had a wonderful time together. But Nell liked to play basketball. She loved to dance. And she was the life of the party. One stage she was a little bit overweight. She overcome that, I can tell you. And she married a man named Wald Blint. They have a big family. She had twins that weighed 18 pounds plus, and the two boys, and they're flying now, men with their own families. And when we rang up to see if it was a world record weight, and they told us no, that in Italy there was records of women having twins with each child being that weight. So that dashed that effort. Yeah, I was the first son. Spoiled rotten. My sisters used to dress me up in girls' clothes, baby girls' clothes, and push me around the stroller. I can even remember that, and I've never forgiven them for it. Yeah, God, they were beautiful women, but yeah, they gave me some stick, I'll tell you. Yeah, John SEEDSMAN, he was a ordinary knockabout bloke. It was during the war, and we used to come home from school. We didn't have a second pair of shoes, and we used to run around with our bare feet and play a lot in the air raid shelters with the wet sand. The sand was freezing cold, and we did the things that boys did. John eventually got interested in athletics through my dad, and he was a successful middle distance runner. He loved his athletics, and he eventually went on to coach the other young kids and young people to run, and he was a very bright bloke. John did very well in his school, and he finished up as in charge of the IT section of the Auditor General's Department. Good bloke. My father died in his 60s, which was pretty young, I thought, but when Anne was there, Anne came home, we idolised her. We had our own little sister, and she just was part of the show, and she grew up very close to my mother, extremely close actually, and she was a major player in our family with the care and love of mum, together with my other sisters. They were great too. And Anne now married a fellow named Terry Neal. He's a gentleman and a scholar. They live at Orange. Anne works amongst children. Terry's been a school teacher all his life. And they rear trotting horses and sell the foals. During my tenure as a butcher, I spent 3 months in the National Service, which was in those days compulsory to register and do. It was 3 months away from the butcher shop, and I recall the first day I went into the army, the National Service, they called my name out, and I thought, what's happened here? And they sent me into the butcher shop, so I spent the entire 3 months in the butcher shop, but I did do all the things I had to do, like learn to shoot, hand grenades and other things. I left the butcher shop with Mr. Treweek and worked in a couple of other shops with the intention to try and get my own shop. However, that didn't eventuate. And sitting there with my dad and talking, he was a great man for the public service, and he had a brother who was a policeman in Melbourne. He encouraged me to join the New South Wales Police Force, and I, like most boys, I suppose, I thought that was a good idea. And in 1957 I joined the police force, and I did my training at Redfern and police barracks there. I recall my first transfer was to a place called Regent Street in the city of Sydney, right near the Central Railway, and my job was to direct traffic mainly around Broadway and the city area, and stand up all day standing up directing traffic. After a while I made an application to go to the bush, and I was granted a transfer to a place called Peak Hill, which is between Parkes and Dubbo. It was a 3-man police station. At the time, Gloria and I had Paul, and David was on the way. We did it pretty rough for a while, living in a garage, until we got some accommodation, and eventually we were able to rent an electricity company's house, and that's where David was born. In time, through the influence of my boss, Jack Lanigan, I used to go to Dubbo and relieve the detectives on their holidays and what have you. And I got the feeling that I wanted to be a plainclothes policeman. Because of that, I applied for a transfer to Sydney, and I was transferred in plain clothes to Redfern. I found that as a bit of a shock coming from Peak Hill. Peak Hill had 1,500 people, and Redfern, I don't know, had millions, it seemed. From there, I did my courses, and I was transferred to the Vice Squad, and I didn't like that very much. I used to work amongst the prostitutes and pedophiles in toilets and people interfering with kids and that. So I made an application to move, and I was granted a transfer to a one-man police station at Somerton, which is between Tamworth and Gunnerdale, 150 people in the village, and 1,500 families to service, rural families. When we went to Somerton, we had Louise. She was born whilst I was at Redfern. Whilst we were there, Karen and Denise were born at Tamworth Base Hospital, and I really enjoyed my time there, and my wife, who was a city girl, loved the country, and she just fitted in and enjoyed herself. From there I went to Taree, where I worked as a uniformed policeman. Part of my work at Taree was, apart from being on the road and with horrendous accidents, and that was the main highway, and surrounded by massive trees and dreadful accidents. I made application to go to the stock squad at Taree, and I got a transfer right. They sent us to Inverell. I remember that time our marriage was in great danger of failing. Gloria didn't want to leave Taree. She wanted to go more back towards her home in Sydney. We went to Inverell, and I was in charge of the stock squad in Inverell. I looked after a massive area in northwestern New South Wales, charging people with stealing stock, grain, whatever. And I enjoyed my time there. Whilst we were there, my son Andrew was born. And in time I got promoted to a sergeant and was told that I had to leave the job. I was offered a three-man police station to be in charge of, or to come to Sydney. I asked for time to make my mind up, and when I got up and spoke to Gloria, it took her 3 seconds, and next thing we're on, we're back to Sydney. I was transferred back to a police residence at Campbelltown for 6 months, and I worked at the Campbelltown police station. I moved from Campbelltown police station to Liverpool police station. I came back to Sydney as a detective, and I worked in the detective's office at Campbelltown and Liverpool. Had a fair deal of success at Liverpool with crime, and I was then transferred as an investigator to the Royal Commission into Drugs in New South Wales, which was brought on as a result of a man named Donald Mackay being murdered by the Italians in the drug industry. I enjoyed that time. From there I was transferred to the consorting squad, which was worked out of the CIB in Sydney. That's where 3 police work together and try to prevent groups of people, criminals, getting together to commit crime. I was then transferred to a squad called the Nugan Hand Bank Inquiry. I was in charge of that. Whilst in that squad, I worked with federal police. It was a Commonwealth state drug thing. It was to do with banks that were facilitating criminals' money to be sent overseas to bring drugs into Australia and to wash any kind of bad money that they wanted to wash. They'd take, say, 400,000 off you, take 40% off you and give you a false loan which washed your money for you. Whilst I was at the Nugan Hand Inquiry, I travelled to a number of countries. I went to Philippines, I went to Hong Kong, United States of America, where I interviewed people there. I eventually came back, and that inquiry folded up. I asked the Commissioner if I could go nearer to home. I was transferred in charge of Campbelltown detectives, where there were 24 detectives at the time, and I finished up resigning from the police force from that station. I had a lot of pressures in the police force. and I was disenchanted to some extent. And I met a man that owned a massive chicken industry named Bob Ingham. Employed 6,000 people, and he informed me that he had been advised by the manager of Woolworths that he should get someone around him that understood kidnapping and other forms of injury to families, as Woolworths had been attacked by criminals. He asked me to assist him to find out about kidnapping and about what happens and how you try and recover people and what have you. I travelled to 3 or 4 seminars with him, and I used to see him a lot. He'd come down and talk to me. He had a few family problems, and I was able to assist there. And one day he rang me and said, "Look, we've got a number of people who want to employ as security managers." He said, "Will you come and sit in while we interview them?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Just give me their names and their dates of birth and I'll tell you what their backgrounds are." I said, "Because they're going to know everything about you and all your private life and what have you." That sort of rung a bell with him. And an hour later he rang me up and said, "I want to see you." And he asked me if I'd come and work for him. And he offered me a lot more money than I was getting in the police. And as I said, I'd had a lot of pressures and I wasn't completely balanced. So I went to work, private enterprise, but I didn't like it. Having been in the police was completely different. And being reared in a family where people really cared, I just had to stay there because I had to feed my family. I guess I was one of the most bloody devout policemen you'd ever meet. I just loved it. And the challenge of your mind against some crook and the things you got to achieve for families, and even when people went to jail, you would be able to get their wives and kids and take them down to Centrelink and help them. It is really a job where you can do so much for people and achieve a lot of satisfaction. Not so much the crooks, if they make their mind up to do something bad, well, they got to know when they're doing it. So they just have to wear what the results are. But I didn't leave the police with too many enemies. Well, as I said, Rosebery is where I was reared, and it was a quiet little place. And little groups of boys from the schools used to get together, and I suppose little gangs, but no violence, what have you. And I was sitting in a gutter outside a shop. Outside a shop where I used to do some deliveries, actually. And my wife and her sister walked past. And saw these 2 good-looking sorts, so a bit of cheek. I said g'day. They ignored us, and we might have passed a comment that they were nice-looking girls. Anyhow, as I got into the butcher shop, I told you that I had worked in Rosebery for 7 years, and Gloria and her family used to come around there to buy their meat because it was the only butcher shop in the place. And I got to know her very well, and we seemed to get on well together. Our first little romance wasn't very much appreciated by both families, and the nuns at the school were going to belt me with umbrellas and what have you, but as life goes, it went on. We used to go to dances and we used to go to the movies of a Saturday, and as I told you, I had my little Austin A40 motor car, so we were able to go on picnics with some other Gloria's school friends and their boyfriends and what have you, and we moved through, and after a long courtship, we married. We married at St Joseph's Catholic Church, Rosebery. We had a honeymoon had our wedding reception in Kingsford. We had our honeymoon at the Gold Coast. And then we started our life. We owned a fruit and vegetable shop at Rosebery, which my father helped fund. And we were in the shop, and I used to get out of bed very early in the morning, 4:30, to go into the market and sit there to buy the fresh vegetables. Gloria would open the shop, and it wasn't very long after we were there that she started to get off colour of a morning, and she had morning sickness. And after 9 months and 3 weeks, my eldest son Paul was born. He was born at St Margaret's Hospital, as were a number of our children. I recall from the word go that Gloria was a meticulous person in herself, in her home, and everything that she did, and she's still the same today. Tidy, spotlessly clean, and a wonderful, wonderful wife and a wonderful, wonderful housekeeper. Never once in our marriage did Gloria ever complain with my transfers or with my work. She supported me 100%. Despite the fact that we started to build our family, we were able to manage the money. As I said before, the first son was Paul. Paul was born a lovely boy, very strong-willed, very, very strong-willed. And throughout his life he's made good friends and well-read, been a very important part in our life, as I'll mention later, with some of the decisions we had to make, and even today he's still very close. David came along, and David's always been a beaut kid. He was soft. He should never have been a policeman, because David's the kindest person you'll meet. He loved his sport, loved his friends, and had a really enjoyable young life, and particularly at Inverell and other places. He gained friends there that he's still friendly with. He was very good at school, excelled in his sport, and eventually became a great cricketer, and plays with a very low golf handicap. David is a kind person, as I said, and even now he's very important in our life. The next born was Louise. Louise, a beautiful little girl, came home. She's probably will be the matriarch of our family. She grew up beautifully, always around Mum, helping Mum and doing what she could do, had nice friends, had a few laughs here and there with her at school and what have you. And she went to work for the bosses at some of the bosses at Ingham's. Was a very successful and happy and competent personal assistant. She ended up marrying a man named Bob Greenup, who was the New South Wales manager of Ingham's, and she's got a lovely marriage now. My next baby was Karen. Karen was born at Tamworth Base Hospital, and I can recall that we would be in bed, and Gloria would give me a nudge to say, I think we'd better go to the hospital. And we had a 24-kilometre drive to Tamworth Base Hospital. We get ourselves dressed, and I'd race across the road and grab the woman who lived in the house overstairs. She'd come and stay with the kids while I took Gloria to hospital. I was never allowed to be with her while she had the baby. In fact, I was stopped at the door, and cranky old mate would send me home, but that was good. I was back with the kids. Karen really enjoyed her life. She liked to dance and do other things, and a very kind person, very, very kind person. She did very well at school. And she finished up as a receptionist, a personal assistant to one of the real bosses of Ingham's. She ended up marrying him, and now they've got the happiest marriage you could ever imagine, and a lovely family. Now we come to Denise. Denise is a beautiful human being. She was born at Tamworth. Never any problem with Denise. She just grew up a lovely little country girl when she lived at Tamworth, Taree and Inverell. Made friends, and she still got friends that she made then. And she's caring. She's quite smart. He is married. He married and has 2 children. That marriage failed, but she's now with a wonderful partner, and she has a great life. She's very caring to her mother. And eventually Andrew was born. He was born when we were at Inverell. I remember it was a rotten cold day, stinking cold day, and I made my mind up that I was going to watch this baby be born. I sat there. Eventually, Gloria said, you better go and feed the kids. And they hadn't been fed, so I raced home to feed them and found that Paul had fed them, was feeding them with cornflakes or Weet Bix or something. I wasn't home 10 minutes and the doctor rang me to say you've got a son and he's healthy. Andrew's a bloke like David, loves to have friends around him, is an intelligent man. He's a nurse, very caring nurse. Played his rugby union and loved it, played his rugby league and loved it. Still has school friends. He's married to a gorgeous Frida, and they now have their family. My eldest son Paul when he came to Sydney, he went to Campbelltown High School. He met a girl named Jenny Green, and they had a romance as young people, and they married. They had 2 sons, James and Nicholas, magnificent human beings. And in time, the marriage broke up, and in time, Paul met and married a woman named Beth Connolly. She was a New South Wales police officer working in the child mistreatment section, where she saw many horrendous things. They're a very happily married couple. They have 2 children of that marriage, Sean and Amy. Paul was a detective in the New South Wales Police Force, very well regarded. Finished his time as a homicide squad detective, and he and Beth eventually moved to Queensland, where they now live with their family. I think a lot to do with this, so that Beth could be care for and look after her mum. And we certainly love her, and we also love Jenny very much. David, as a young man, teenage years and a little older, had the fullest life you could ever imagine. David had many friends. As I said, he was very good at his cricket and his golf. Had a number of nice lady friends as a young man, and David met and married a girl named Wendy Fields. And as a result of that marriage, Jared and Daniel came along, 2 of my grandsons, and they just, both of them were both outstanding young men. David's marriage failed for a number of reasons which I won't mention, and David undertook the responsibility of rearing his boys. Never once has he faltered, and some tough times, and his own health suffered, and yet he's dug in there, and now he's got 2 magnificent young blokes, and I guess in time they'll meet their girls and they'll marry, and David will be a bloody old grandfather like me. When David met Wendy and married her, she had a daughter named Kiara, a beautiful little girl with black hair that you'd kill for. She grew up like any other little girl, and now she's a magnificent human being, very caring. She must be very intelligent because she always holds good jobs. She cares very much for her brothers, Daniel and Jared, and she's very much loved by us. She is a fair dinkum little Aussie girl, and been through a bit, but by the same token, she's up there and has a great life. Louise was born at St Margaret's Hospital, and for a number of reasons Gloria wasn't able to feed Louise as a bub. She came home with her, and she was being bottle fed. Gloria had a severe hemorrhage, had to go back to hospital because she wasn't feeding her. The hospital said she wasn't part of the same unit, so she had to stay at home, and she looked after with my mother-in-law, Louise, and myself, and it was a test, I can tell you. We have this little tiny tot, probably about 10, 12 days old. Used to have to bath and what have you, but we loved her, and she survived. She not only survived that, she developed as a magnificent woman. At the age of 14 or 15, Louise met this bloke who used to be a milkman, used to go to school, same school as the boys, and they had a baby. The baby was born at Camden Hospital, Joshua, and at the time it was common for babies to be adopted. And I sought the best advice I could possibly get in relation to what should be done. and also we had a few pressures at home. And I went to the Catholic Adoption Agency, I went to the nuns, I went to the doctors, I went to the Centrelink, as it is now, to talk, and the advice I got was to adopt the baby, give Louise a chance to live and give the baby a chance. The baby was adopted, and that was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. Every night Louise would cry and I'd sit with her. Mother used to be terribly, terribly upset and crying. But anyhow, the years went by and we tried to find out how he was going because of the laws in relation to adoption. I found that very difficult. At the same time, my sister Molly, who was the nun, kept saying to Louise, keep writing to the agency, keep writing to the adoption agency. She did, and they kept passing it on to Joshua's mum. And I remember I was out fishing on the Great Barrier Reef once, and standing in the back of a boat at 9 o'clock at night, telling a man about this. Told that many people, it didn't matter, but telling this man about it. He said, I know the boy. He said, I coach him in football. He said, he lives in Tamworth. He said, I can organise for you to meet him. I said, couldn't believe it. Anyhow, I was assured then that he was healthy. And in fact, he was more than healthy. He was a magnificent athlete. Came back to Louise ended up marrying the young man, and that marriage didn't work out. At the age of 18, Louise was able to get his birth certificate. So she left it for a little while, and she contacted the Catholic Adoption Agency, and they said, you've got a letter here, do you want to read it? And she nearly burned her tyres out getting there to read it. There he was, he wanted to meet his mother. And I went with Gloria and Louise and her son. We went to a unit in Surfers Paradise, and the big day came to meet him. I'll never forget it. We were meeting at a restaurant, and we're sitting there waiting, and around the corner come this young bloke with his cap on back to front, a ringer for his father. His father was a young bloke we knew very well, and never had any great blue with him. David Williams was his name. And around the corner he came, and he walked out of his father's picture. We had a nice meal together. We met the parents, and the father wasn't terribly enamoured about me, I don't think, but his mother was just an angel. Anyhow, we had as I said, a meal, and after that, his mum said to him, Josh, you go and spend some time with Louise. So he came back to the unit with us, and the son that Louise had with her was Mark. Now, Mark isn't a bloke that comes and cuddles up to you very much, but I couldn't believe on that day he's sitting on Joshua's lap, and it was just as though it was a miracle. But they were together, and once again Louise had her baby boy back, and she's now the grandmother to their two children, and yeah, things are going good. Louise married a man named Bob Greenup. As I said, they've got two children, Mark and Scotty. And Bob's a businessman. He was a boss at Ingham's, but highly intelligent, understands business. Louise is his right-hand man. She's behind him all the way. So they are successful, and they're very happy together, and he's a great son-in-law, actually, Bob, and it's lovely to see the family as good as they are. Scotty's about 6'3" or 4". He's very intelligent. He excels in IT. In fact, he's got his degree in it. He has a lovely lady friend, and they work in that field. Scotty has been to the United States of America with the large computer companies. He's very kind, very caring, and just a great human being. Mark, on the other hand, is another story. Mark's always been on the ball, likes to keep to himself. And I remember once his mum and dad were away, and Gloria and I were over the house, running the house and feeding them and looking after the dogs and that. And he said to me, "Have you got a ticket in the $33 million lotto tonight?" And I said, "Yes." I didn't have. I told him a fib. And he said, "If you win, can I get $2 million off you?" I said, "Yes." At the time he was doing work experience, and I was driving into work, and we got down over the river at Sutherland, and he said, "Hang on a minute, how old are you?" So I told him, he said, "Look," he said, "if you don't spend that money and you invest it, it'll double in no time." He said, "I can get $4 million off you, can't I?" So that's the picture of Mark. He's smart. He now works in a distribution area where they accept goods. He's responsible for the incoming and outgoing goods, and he's doing good too, and knows how to save a quid. As I said, Mark's different. He was very annoyed about the way some of the immigrants were being treated. So he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, John Howard. There was no response, so he wrote another one and let him have it second hand, but that's Mark. Well, as I said, my daughter Karen was born in Tamworth and reared around the police station in Somerton as a little girl. Came to Sydney, went to school at St Patrick's College, Campbelltown. The captain of the school, highly respected, the tidiest and neatest person you'd ever see, with her books herself, as she is today. She's a ringer for a mother. Carol married John Hickston, who was actually my boss at Ingham's, a man of extreme intelligence, and his work ethic was great. They have 3 children, all extremely intelligent children, beautiful grandchildren. Christopher did very well at school and now runs his own IT business. Tom is a beautiful boy. He's caring, and he's very involved in photography and does well. He has a lovely lady friend, and she's gorgeous. And their sister Claire is a school teacher. She went through the college as a student, a school teacher, and I don't think I've seen a harder course, and she just dedicated herself and got top marks. She then was accepted into a very well regarded school not far from where she lives. She lives at Hunters Hill with her mum and dad at the time, but she's now at Balmain. She has a fiancé named James, and they will marry next year 2019, and she's just one hell of a girl. Beautiful to look at, and has a wicked sense of humour, mainly because of her brother Tom, but they are just a beautiful family, and she's right up there at the top of the tree. Denise SEEDSMAN is my youngest daughter. She loves her friends. Recently she had to come down to say farewell to one. Always been very caring, laid back. She did well at school, worked in solicitors' offices, and she married Rod Harold, and they have 2 children, Jessica and Kate. Both beautiful women. Jessica's getting married next year. Kate's a lovely, tall, blonde girl, and has a wicked sense of humour. Denise's marriage to Rod didn't last. She now has a partner named Richard. He's got a bit wrong with him. He's in New Zealand and barracks for the All Blacks, but he's a very decent, kind man, and she's very happy in her life. She works in an optometrist shop. She manages it, actually, and Denise has always had a lot of knowledge, a lot of common sense, and she's in constant contact with her mum, and she's a crackerjack beauty. And now we come to Andrew. Andrew, as I said, was born in Inverell. Throughout his life he's been fully engaged in sport, loves sport, still loves it, and made wonderful friends. He, as I say, he went through life, played his football, enjoyed his teenage years. He'd pack his bag of a Friday night, we'd see him again on the Sunday. He'd come home. He studied at the University of Campbelltown and is now a nurse, a highly respected nurse. He works in a hospital at Hunters Hill. And on April Fool's Day 2007, Andrew married Frida. Frida's a lovely Greek girl, absolutely delightful human being. Comes from a beautiful family who we know very well, and she's a marvellous wife. As a result of the marriage, they have 4 beautiful children, and they are Eden, the boy, the eldest boy is Eden, Lily, Liam and John are twins. They live at Gladesville. They have a wonderful marriage. Andrew is a hard worker. Frida never stops working, and she also works very hard to keep the family going. They go to the local public school, and they do very well there, and altogether they're a lovely couple, and we love them very much. I was born into a family where my father was private secretary to a senator in the Labor Party, and all of my life, young life especially, I saw people coming to our home when my father would care for them because of his position. And he also used to be involved in the local Labor Party group. And I started off was in a garage at the back of a house, and they used to have these meetings, and they used to talk about the working people and how the unions had developed wages for people, starting with the kids in the mines years ago in England, and to the present time where the unions work hard to achieve fair payment for their workers. So all my life I've been a Labor bloke. I've had the daylights kicked out of me by a lot of people, but anyhow, they can all do what they like about that. And as Dad got involved as a secretary to the senator, become more involved in politics, and that was sort of our everyday talk. My father tried twice to get elected, and he failed. He used to ride his push bike. He had no car. He'd ride his push bike probably 10, 12 kilometres to go and knock on doors and try and encourage people to vote for him. And if I told you the quality of the people who beat him in the voting, you'd have a laugh. I still love the Labor Party, and I'll stand up every day that they want to take me on, and the working class people are my people. As a kid, I was a bit of a sook, I suppose, a young bloke, and it wasn't until I went to Marist Brothers Randwick that I got involved in rugby league. I used to go and watch South Sydney a lot, and I actually saw one of the greats of rugby league, Clyde Churchill, play his first game for South Sydney. And at Marist Brothers Randwick, I got involved in the rugby league teams and enjoyed it, and I also played cricket there and enjoyed that. And after I left school, I got very, very involved with my brother-in-law, Bernie O'Neill, and he was a lover of racing, and he introduced me to it all, not altogether, because my father loved the racing too. And I used to regularly go to the races and the trots with Bernie, and we'd win or we'd lose, and whatever it was that happened. As I said, we played tennis, and I played tennis from C grade to A grade. I really loved my tennis. It was great. And as a result of that, now I suffer badly from skin cancers because of my exposure to the sun, as many people do. Now, retired, I worked out that you can win at the races if you study the systems in relation to figures. Racing is a business where professional people make their living, and if you get involved with the top trainers, training the very best bred horses with the people with money, then you have the patience to wait, you can possibly win at gambling. But apart from that, you just can't go in and back everything and hope to win. But I still love me racing. I love the breeding, and I guess I'll always do that. As I stated, I've been married for 61 years. It's just been a wonderful journey. My life in comment. My 84 years of life have been a very blessed experience, having been reared in a very caring Catholic family environment and then marrying my sweetheart, Gloria Louise McMahon, who in turn gave us 6 special human beings. I feel I've been the luckiest man in the world, and thank God for it, and thank the people who made that possible.